first FEI meeting of the 2021-2022 year. And so I'm here to introduce everyone and get things started here. Jay and the board of directors have done a fabulous job this year putting together a program. You can see we're kind of still working between virtual and in person, so we've got some people here. But hopefully this will keep evolving. There's a lot of PD sessions. And let me start with that then. Let's start with the sponsors. Sponsors are what makes our chapter great because they bring in the PD, professional development sessions, or resources. You've got an issue, there's somebody in our sponsor group you can talk to. And they also provide us some financial support to allow us to do the things we put on these sessions. And let me put the other people just as important. All right, for those of you that are here in person, remember there's a lot more tables, and after the session is done, introduce yourself around. We'd love to get more people involved in the leadership. You can contact any of the people on the screen or contact Michelle. And there's a lot of ways you can get involved, helped out, and we're very willing to have you help become involved in the board of directors at the level that you have time to become involved. There's one CPE for the session today. If you're here, you need to sign in and out on the sheet at the table as the entrance. For those of you virtual, you need to complete the questions at the end of the session. And Michelle will post those. Watch for those at the end of the session. We're going to do a 5-minute survey. It'll be sent out to everyone tomorrow after this session. We ask you to just complete it. It's quick, doesn't take long, but it gives us some feedback, and hopefully we can take that feedback and continue improving and making things even better in the future. The Diversity and Inclusion Club. Here are some of the upcoming sessions. Jill Bean has done a fabulous job with this. That virtual book club, I didn't get involved this first time, but I want to get involved. I just didn't have the time, and I've been telling people I don't have the time, and geez, it's been a long time since I've read it. So I should do that. So I want to get involved at the next one. It's a great idea. And then equally good group is Denise and the Peer Group. This is a group of businesses that get together and share information and use each other to help them. And in some of these situations where you've got new regulation and new rules, to have people that have a piece of the puzzle and can help you is great. So their next meeting is December 16th. If you're not a part of that, reach out and become a part of that group. Our next meeting is going to be October 20th at Bridgestone down in Bridgewood, down in Neenah. We're bringing in Nathan Mueller. He was the accounting manager in ING, got caught in an $8.5 million fraud. And every couple of years we bring in somebody, and sadly, a number of people around that we can bring in to talk about it. But what we're trying to do with these is to talk about what situation caused somebody to cross the line, to go from the light gray to the dark gray. Back what Andy Fastow said a couple of years ago, there's no black line, there's just a lot of gray. So Nathan, a number of us have heard him. You'll do a great job making sure you get to that session next month. We have new members. And I'm not going to go through the names, I'm not going to, but Michelle did a great job putting the members in pictures. And you see these people at a meeting, and obviously not wearing a mask so you can recognize them. Say hi, bring them into the meeting, get them involved. Here's the last. With that, we're going to get to why we're here tonight. And I'm going to give just a brief introduction to Chancellor Alexander. Michelle did a very nice job putting together a bio when she sent it out for the meeting. But there's two things I wanted to point out. Number one, in looking through Chancellor Alexander's past, you saw that he spent 10 years in Wisconsin, 1995 to 2004. Some years at UW-Milwaukee for his master's, and then years at UW-Madison for his PhD. And I'd like to believe that one of the reasons it was easy to bring him back from Colorado to Wisconsin is that when you've been in Wisconsin for a while, when you get to know the warm people in Wisconsin, it's easy to come back to Wisconsin. So that's the reason why he came back. It was us. The other thing that kind of struck me is that Chancellor Alexander is the 7th chancellor. I've actually taught school out here for all 7 of them. And gosh, it's hard to believe because I'm so young looking at how could that possibly happen. But every one of the chancellors have had different skills and different abilities, and I think Chancellor Michael Alexander is the right person at the right time for this university. So with that, Chancellor.
Thanks, Gary. It's good to be here with you all. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. And what Gary didn't tell you is I believe the average tenure of Chancellors of UW-Green Bay was about 1.5 years each. So he's definitely looking good in the thing. So I am very excited to have you all here, first of all, on our campus, and welcome to everybody who's online. I want to acknowledge that Dean Matt Dornbush is here from the Kaufman School of Business. And as I thought about what to say today, I've had the opportunity throughout my career. I've been very fortunate to speak to a lot of groups. Never my wildest dreams, but I think I'd be invited to a group called Financial Executives International. That is about as scary a thing as a musician that I could possibly imagine doing. Running a professional orchestra, if I saw an accountant, I would run as fast as I possibly could run away from that person. So it's fun for me to be here today to get a chance to talk to you and to share what we're doing at the university and really talk a lot about why what's happening at the university, I think, is very relevant to the work that you're doing, particularly in Northeast Wisconsin. So I'm very honored to work here. I'm very fortunate to be in a university that is sort of bucking all the trends that are happening across the country for regional comprehensive universities. Not only that, it's doing so in a pretty dynamic fashion. We're really thinking about the world very differently. We're thinking about the world of higher education very differently. And we're thinking about our place in it and how it relates to the region that we serve. And that means a lot to me. So I think as we look at higher education and we look at sort of the ecosystems in each region of the country, I know we used to think a lot globally, and it's still important, obviously, to think globally. The world has gotten a lot smaller, right, over the last time. But what's also true for sure is that what happens locally is really, really crucial to a region being able to succeed. And we know that public regional institution in a locality, the success of that university or the amount of higher education that's in a particular area has a direct impact on how that region will perform often going forward. So I'll start today by talking about this. And I think it's important to understand, I think one of the things that I noticed when I first came into higher education was that when I went to school, you had to go to school because you needed information. So the only place you could get information was if you went to a university where there were a lot of books. It was the only place you could find those books. Right? It wasn't going to be necessarily in your public library unless you lived in New York City or some place like that. You had to go where the knowledge was. There was no one, when I graduated high school, there was no one where I lived that I could go talk to that could teach me the things that I had to do when I went to college. Right about the time I went to college, I remember when I started as an undergrad, and they said that we're going to give you an email account. And I remember thinking that's kind of cool, and used it to email my friends, but I never thought really what that would amount to, or really even that how you'd use the internet that much. It was kind of a fad at the time. And I remember even some of my professors saying, I'm not going to use email, that's going to go away, right? And what's changed, right, is now, because of how the world has changed, students don't need to come to the university anymore to get information, right? They have information. It fits in their hands. They get that information instantaneously, and they expect to get it instantaneously. The way the world has really changed, in my opinion, is now they have unlimited information and they have no idea how to use it. Right? That's obvious every day. Right? So what a university's role has changed. The university doesn't have to, you don't have to have necessarily a person in front of a room talking to 200 people and giving you, information that you could do on your own. Right? What you need is reasons for people to come together to be able to interpret the information that they're seeing, to be able to discuss it in a civil way, right? And to be able to understand how to use it for the common good of society. And this really doesn't matter what field you're in, right? But I think sometimes, particularly in finance or in accounting, as Gary was talking about gray, this matters. Right? As I learned throughout my time, when we're even at the university, right? How you ask a question to an accountant, you'll get sometimes a very different answer. Right? And what we need, right, what Northeast Wisconsin needs, and certainly society needs, right, who are people who understand how to get the information, but more importantly, how to use it. So what we're trying to do at UW-Green Bay is to think about this in the same way Wayne Gretzky did. Right? That it's impossible to predict what's going to happen. Right? The pace of change in the modern age, especially in digital age, is unbelievably quick. Right? The second you move, already the puck is 5 feet in front of you. What we have to try to do is to think broadly, right, about the skills that students will need and when they will need it throughout their careers. So we're really trying to build a university, in essence, for a world that doesn't yet exist. Used to be all students pretty much came to college at 18. They finished around 22. That was called a traditional student. Nowadays, that is a non-traditional student. That student rarely exists. And if it exists, it typically exists because that student has a lot of socioeconomic means, and it means that they often had a lot of support from their family and finance to be able to go to college. So they've often had people in their family who've already been to college. Okay? One of the most shocking statistics about UW-Green Bay, right, and why I think it's such an important institution in the state, 43% of UW-Green Bay students are first-generation college students. They're the first in their families to go to a university. I'll say that again. 43% of our students are first-generation college students. We are now, I'm incredibly proud about this as of last year, we are now the 4th most diverse institution in the state. We're about to be the 3rd. I think we might hit it this year. We have to give it another month for our final data to go in. We're the only institution in the state of Wisconsin to grow for 6 straight years. I want you to think about that. Okay? Across the country, regional comprehensives are seeing double-digit percentage losses per year in enrollment. We're the only institution in the state of Wisconsin to grow for 6 straight years. We're one of the few institutions that are financially stable. We're actually adding positions. We're trying to keep up with demand, what's happening in the growth that we've had at UW-Green Bay. I'll talk more about that in just a few minutes. So we're trying to the reason we're doing that, right, is we're thinking differently about who we're teaching. So the number of in-person students living in the dorms at UW-Green Bay hasn't changed for like 20-something years. So why is our enrollment basically doubled over that time? It's because we're teaching a whole bunch of different students. Right? We're thinking differently about what education means. Right? When you get it, how you get it, the modality with which you get it in. So during the pandemic, I got asked the question all the time, right? Should it be in person or should it be online? And my answer is always yes. That's correct. Why? Because different people need to have access to education in different ways at different times in their life. You all are working professionals, right? It's unlikely you're going to quit your job and go back to college for 2 years to get a degree. It's just not going to happen. But you still might need to update your skills. If that's the case, that's where the university has to be ready to meet you where you're at. You have to be willing to understand that, particularly in the state of Wisconsin, right? We have over 1 million people that have skills to be able to be in a different job, right? One that's more productive and they can pay them a higher wage, but simply can't stop being in the job they're currently in to quit and go back to college. We are trying to understand that that's where the market is in higher education. Okay? I always use the analogy. There's a great story about the shoe salesman, right? And there's 2 shoe companies, and one shoe company sends one of their salespeople off to a new market, and the person arrives there, and they call back to the company right away, and they say, I don't know why you sent me here. No one is wearing shoes. I'm coming home. The next company next door sent another salesperson over to that region. That person arrived at the place and called their company back and says, this is unbelievable. There's room for 100% growth. That's what we're trying to do at UW-Green Bay, is to understand that people need education from prior to high school, right? They need support. We need to support what's happening in the K-12 system, right? All the way through retirement, right? That education doesn't just happen from 18 to 22. Right? When people ask me about the enrollment at UW-Green Bay, carefully, because I know I'm not allowed to say this in official outlets, even though I've tried, I think our enrollment is 100,000. Why? Because we have over 9,000 students. We're going to get close to 10,000 this year. Students who study with us in sort of a traditional way. We have another 70 to 90,000 students a year who engage with us in some kind of continuing education. But the world doesn't yet count that as a student. We count that as a student. Why? Because that's how the world now works. Right? People want education now. They want it when they want it, how they want it, in a way that's convenient to their career. If you don't do that, I think this is what happens to you. Right? So when I was a kid, Kodak was one of the most powerful companies in the world. Right? And the story goes, when digital photography came out, they said, we don't need to worry about that. We do film. We do it really well. And it's true. Right? So just like this piece of higher education that I'll talk about is, there's just like there's an equity in the world at times, there's an equity in higher education. We have to think about things a little differently. I'll give you some numbers here that I think are pretty shocking, and maybe as people in finance, you'll help me make sense of this. The biggest difference between us and UW-Madison is $2.2 billion with a B dollars a year. That's the difference in our annual budgets. The endowment at Harvard is $42 billion. A little over, actually. I don't want to shortchange them. Over $42 billion. The endowment at Madison, over $4 billion. The endowment at UW-Green Bay, anybody want to take a guess? It's not $4 billion. It's $40 million. Okay? And that's doubled. So we have to play. I love the movie Moneyball, the book called, right? Moneyball, right? It's sort of the story about the Oakland A's and how they competed with the New York Yankees. Right? We have to think as a university very much like that, or we'll become Kodak. Right? We can't play the same game. Right? The job of UW-Green Bay is not to cure cancer. So I don't begrudge any of the dollars that Harvard or Madison have. I think they should get more. Why? Because they're trying to solve global problems. They need those kind of resources to be able to solve those problems. What we need to do, right, is to fill a role, right, where people across the region have a place to be able to go to get education. With, in essence, they may not have any other option. Their option is they have to stay local. They need an access point to get that education. That's why UW-Green Bay exists. It's to serve its community. It's to do local research. One of the things that I'm so thrilled about when I got here is to learn about the work that UW-Green Bay did to help clean up the Fox River, right? What we're doing now on the Bay, right? That is incredibly relevant to the future of this region. We don't necessarily, we love it. We don't necessarily need $40 billion to do that. It would help. But we can do that kind of research, right, with a little less money, but have a dramatic impact on what's happening in our region. That's how we're trying to think about this as we go forward. So in higher education, there's a lot of issues that I think are important to understand. Access being the first. That everyone in the history of higher education is, every time since I started going to school, and most of us have likely experienced this, every university talks about, and in fact they brag about, that we want to make sure we get the smartest and brightest students that come to our university. They will tell you, right, the reason you should come to this university is because we only accept 6% of the students who apply. That's a point of pride for that university. Okay? And again, I don't begrudge any of that, right? We need those kind of institutions. There are few institutions, other than us, right, who are saying, right, we're going to teach you where you're at. If you want further education, it's our job to provide it for you. Doesn't mean we're not going to take a 4.0 student with 1600 on the SAT. We'll also take that student. And it may be appropriate sometimes for that student to come. But it also means we're going to teach a student with a 2.5 GPA, right, that maybe didn't do so great on the standardized tests. Why? Because what's happening in this region, how many of your companies are short in labor? See a lot of heads nodding for those of you who are online. That's the only option Wisconsin has. 70% of UW-Green Bay graduates never leave Northeast Wisconsin. I'll say that one more time. 70% of our graduates never leave Northeast Wisconsin. The best option for this region to continue to flourish is to provide access to those students who traditionally have not had access to higher education. Why? Because the jobs of the future are changing. And the way students have to navigate their careers is changing, right? It could be that you come out of school, you get a $15 an hour job, you do great for 5 years, and you realize, you know what? I'd like to make a little more. Maybe you have a family, maybe other factors change where you need to adjust what you're doing, right? That's how most careers happen right now. People come in and out of education different times. You need to have the access to be able to do so. They also get curious at different times in their lives. Right? It's very possible that a student was in a situation where they just weren't engaged in high school. Doesn't mean they can't do the work. It simply means they haven't done the work yet. And that's the attitude we're trying to take as we think about access in the community. The regional focus, right? Again, we don't have the resources to serve the globe, right? We have the resources to serve Northeastern Wisconsin. Degrees, right? We're trying to think very differently about what it means to have a degree. Some people come to UW-Green Bay, typically those who are 18, they come here because they know I want to get a degree in X, and we're going to provide that experience for them, no doubt. Some people just want a badge. They want a certificate. They want a couple of classes that they can use to help advance their career, right? The idea, I believe, and over the next 10, maybe even 20 years, the idea of degrees is going to become less and less important. The idea of credentials is going to become more and more important. We're trying to move there. We're thinking, and this is something that Matt Dornbush here has been instrumental in helping us to think about. Right? And I'm going to quote Matt just for a second. Right? Why do people want to come in person? I'll talk a little bit more in a few minutes about the way the state of Wisconsin is now investing in the university. So, right next to us is the Coffin Library. Coffin Library is an 8-story building, right, that is 7 stories of books. Not only is that building falling down, even if it were to stay up, it's useless. It's completely irrelevant to how higher education works in the modern age and to what a student feels they're going to get from education for them to enter a space. If the spaces we have are 7 stories of books, the students are going to take classes online. If the spaces we have are engaging and invite them to come to a space because there's a reason to come to that space, they're going to come. And Matt is doing that in the Conference School of Business, right? 2 new spaces that we're getting, the Willie Davis Financial Investment Trading Lab, right? A huge way for our students to engage, right, in real time for what it's like to understand what it means to be in finance, be an investor. Right? Also the Center for Personal Finance, right? A way for us to provide a certificate in certified financial planners, right? And a way for us to be able to train our students, again, 43% of which are first generation college students, how to handle their personal finances. And for us to have a way for us to connect to the community, to help people in the community who want help to be able to handle their finances. This is what matters. This is why people would come in person to a space, right? As opposed to going online, to the classroom of the future, what that looks like, right? It's not a lecture hall, likely. It's a space that they come to for a specific purpose, right? To be able to have an educational experience. Capital we talked about, and the pace of change. So I think one of the things in higher education that is becoming more and more essential, that is, the idea of an institution is that it sort of implies the fact that it stands in place, right? An institution lasts a very long time, it stands on the institution. Institutions in higher education in the future are going to have to change, and they're going to have to change at an unbelievable clip. A lot of statistics show, right, that in the next 10 to 20 years, somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 30%, some of the wilder projections even say 40% of the universities in this country will close. And a ton of them in the Northeast and the Midwest due to demographics. So we have to change. We got to change really, really quickly. So to do that, at UW-Green Bay, we set 6 strategic priorities. First being student success. That everyone at UW-Green Bay has to understand, right? That's the principal reason that we are here, right? Educate students, right, to help them to be successful. First and foremost. That, people talk about our enrollment growth, it has to do with recruiting more students. I will tell you in the last few years, it's mostly because we're just retaining students a whole lot better. Right? Students are able to continue pursuing their educational goals. They don't get sidetracked. Inclusivity. Right? This is in Northeast Wisconsin, if you look at the demographics that are here, right, and particularly the demographics of the younger generation, we are very lucky relative to a lot of the Midwest, but our demographics for a long time are going to stay pretty flat. But the demographics that are growing are populations that have not traditionally been welcomed into higher education or have not taken advantage of it for a variety of reasons. If UW-Green Bay is going to succeed, it has to match the diversity of the region that we are now serving. As Gary mentioned, I lived in Wisconsin for about 10 years. When I came here 2 years ago, I could not believe the demographics that were in Green Bay and the region that we serve. I was shocked, given what I knew what it was when I was here 15 years before coming. And we have to understand that, right? We're an interesting place at Green Bay that we serve both a huge rural population and a huge urban population. We're really one of the only UW schools that does that. But that urban population in particular, and even the rural population, right, is diversifying at an incredible clip, right? And as is the university to make sure that we're able to make sure, I think many of you know this, in the state of Wisconsin is last in the country in the difference between white and non-white educational attainment. Last in the country. UW-Green Bay has an opportunity to help fix that. The diversity that is in this region is relatively new. It is just now coming to the age where many are coming to college. We have to be ready to be able to help everybody thrive that lives here. Digital transformation. I talked about the library. One of the priorities that we have is to make sure that we're able to prepare students for what it's like to go into a digital world. We have to model that as a university. We have to model that as a university. And so we're working very hard to make that happen. For those of you who don't know, UW-Green Bay started in a pretty amazing way. It was on the cover of Newsweek in 1971 cover of Newsweek, which I now you can only find online. But back then, I think 1971 Newsweek was a big deal, right? It was one of the top journals, magazines behind Time magazine. We were on the cover of Newsweek as the initial Eco-U, this radical idea in education. The university started in I don't know a word other than radical used. It started in a radical way. And over time, it maybe lost a little bit of that part of it. We're bringing it back. Why? Because the region needs it. Right? The world needs it. We are sitting, and I'm definitely not an expert here to talk about this, but I can tell you, we are sitting in the largest estuary in the world, largest freshwater estuary in the world, where the Fox River meets Green Bay. The amount of fresh water that is here is not only going to be relevant to our region, it's going to be relevant to the country, and it's going to be relevant to the world in the coming years. Right? We have to understand that, and we have to be a leader in helping our region be able to have a sustainable environment and be a leader in how we're caring for the environment so that everybody around us can thrive. Community engagement. The days of the word ivory tower, right? The days of the university being an ivory tower have to be over. It's really, really important that everything that we do, we have to do with our community and for our community. We can't do it in isolation. So every way that we can engage, we have to do it. You'll notice, I hope you're starting to notice that we're being much more aggressive in how we are connecting to the community, even how we're marketing ourselves. So some of you, I'm sure, have driven down I-43 down to Milwaukee. One of the things I'm quite proud of is that we have a campus in Sheboygan right off of I-43, and I'm not sure many of you know that, because you wouldn't see it. Right? What you see is Acuity, right? And Acuity looks great, right? I mean, fantastic, right? Unbelievable facility. Our facility is literally right next door. That's where our campus is. Now you will see a gigantic digital billboard on I-43 that is literally getting plugged in the next couple of days that will show that we have a campus there and how we're serving Northeast Wisconsin. Right? Really important how we're engaging our community. And finally, in arts and athletics, right? We know that the way most of the region will engage with UW-Green Bay, in addition to education, is by us helping to be a source of quality of life for the region. We're lucky to have an incredible arts facility in the Widener Center here. Cities 5-6 times our size are lucky to have a facility like that. Right? We've got one right here in Green Bay. Right? We have one of only 3 Division I athletic programs in the state. There's actually 4, but I don't count them. That's Marquette. I'm kidding, but there's 3 public Division I. It's a tough crowd. The 3 Division I public institutions, right? We're one of those, right? And so that's really important to us, right? Really important to the region, right? We're Northeast Wisconsin's Division I athletic program. We need to show that. And I'm looking forward to the day when you go to any place and find your collection of Packer gear, and right next to that you find your collection of Phoenix gear. The city of Green Bay should be walking around with Green Bay t-shirts, right? Packers and Phoenix. This is the problem we're trying to solve, right? The educational attainment in our region, you look at where it is relative to Madison or to the state of Wisconsin for undergraduate degrees, it's pretty far below. If you look at graduate degrees, it's really far below. If the region can't solve this problem, it's going to be in big trouble in the future. We know if we go, particularly if you look at manufacturing, which this region is so reliant on, right? Manufacturing jobs are changing. They're changing. They need people now that have degrees, typically, to do the work to help that company continue to grow, right? Continue to thrive. Right? And so we're working very, very hard, right, to fix this problem. We're lucky in the ecosystem that we have here in Green Bay, that we have an amazing private institution in St. Norbert. Okay? We're incredibly lucky to be colleagues at St. Norbert College, and an amazing technical college in NWTC. But the only university that can solve this problem is UW-Green Bay. We're the public regional institution that has to grow to be able to solve the number of degrees that are in our region. Right? We know it's much harder to attract talent from elsewhere than it is to have it be from your area and stay in your area. Right? Gary is right. when he talked about why I came to Green Bay. There's a lot of reasons I came to Green Bay, but one of them certainly is that I lived in Wisconsin. I enjoyed it. I loved living in Milwaukee, loved living in Madison, definitely loved living in Green Bay. So it wasn't my first image wasn't just there's no way I can handle that winter. Although I did forget what it's like in Colorado, you get like 340 days of sunshine a year. I'm remembering now, you don't quite get that in Wisconsin. So this shows here the number of graduates you're going to see coming out of high schools in Green Bay. We're very, very lucky in our 16 county footprint in our region, right? You can see the trend. We're actually going to be in pretty good shape, the number of graduates that come forward. We just need to make sure that enough of them are attending a higher education institution. You can also see what's happening where the population is coming from. Right? If you look at the Hispanic population in our region, right, it's exploding in growth. Right? I'm really proud to say that at UW-Green Bay, the retention rate of our Hispanic students is the highest of any demographic that we have at this university. The highest. It's a shocking number. Couldn't believe it when I got it. It's a really encouraging sign for us for the work that we're doing. This shows our projected enrollment, and I will tell you this is a very conservative estimate. You could look at the red line there, which shows where UW system projected us to be. And you can show in the first 2 years where we started to break apart from that line. Right? So in 2019, 2020, our growth way exceeded what UW system thought was going to happen. This year again, it is exceeding that by a considerable margin. We're going to be hopefully 300, 400, 500 students above the number you're seeing right there by the time we get to October. We're already 300 above it, so we're about 9,500 is what we're looking right now. Over the next month, we should hopefully pick up a few more, and we're likely going to sit somewhere in the 9,700 student range, which means hopefully by next year, we will be over 10,000 students in this university, which is a pretty shocking number for those of you who've been here for a while. For the history of the university was the third smallest UW system school in the third largest economic region of the state. It didn't make sense. So a lot of what we're doing right now is just, in my opinion, right-sizing the institution for the community that we serve. I think this is a pretty powerful thing here. This shows the populations of people who are enrolled in the regional comprehensive in each region. The average across UW system is 2%. Right? So, for example, if you look at Eau Claire, if you look at the counties that Eau Claire serves, right, almost exactly 2% of their population goes there. Some are a little above, some are a little below. UW-Green Bay, as you see, is the lowest on that list. We're 0.94%. If we had 2% of Northeast Wisconsin's population coming to UW-Green Bay, we would be at that number. A little harder for us to do that because of the population size that we have, right? Same reason why Parkside is below. But think about that for a minute. Think about what that number would do to the economy that's here in Northeast Wisconsin, right? If 70% of those people stayed in Northeast Wisconsin, as we know our graduates do, and worked for your companies, that is one of the fastest ways that we can solve the labor problem in this region for years and years to come. And all we'd have to do is hit the average of the UW system schools of what they're getting from their region. I'll shift gears just for a second here, just to talk a little bit about the assumptions that we often make in higher education. And I know I'm talking to a group of highly trained, certified, accountants, financial executives, who it's really important that you know your craft. Right? I don't want to go to an accountant who doesn't understand how to help me out, right? I know, again, I mentioned I rely every day on our CFOs here at the university, right? It's essential you have someone who has enormous skill in that position. However, one of the things that we're learning, I don't know if any of you have listened to Malcolm Gladwell's podcasts, and I find him to be a really interesting guy, how he looks at the world. And in one of his podcasts, he talked about the LSAT. And I just give a little personal anecdote here that when I was deciding what to do, when I came out of high school, I was unsure if I wanted to be a musician or a lawyer, which is a pretty big difference. And I figured I would go to music school, and I'd read a statistic that one of the best ways to get into law school is to get a music degree. For some reason, law schools like to accept musicians. They think, I guess, a particular way. But what I found out when I started going into music is that I was pretty sure I really wanted to do music. My parents were less sure that was a great idea. And they told me to go take the LSAT. I should do that. And I did. And I will never forget the experience because I was relaxed as can be. I went into the room and each section is timed on the LSAT. And you sit down and you do it as fast as you possibly can. And usually you don't finish all the questions on there. I filled out all my questions and went on. I didn't really even study that much at all for the test. I practiced like crazy for 4 years, though, to be able to get in grad school in music. I found out afterward, I did okay on the LSAT. In fact, a couple of the schools that I applied for in music, I couldn't get in, but I was getting letters from their law schools saying, would you apply? Which probably should have told me something, but I still stuck with music. But Malcolm Gladwell was talking about this, and I was really struck when I was in the room. The level of tension on the LSAT of the people who were like literally breaking their pencils in half because they couldn't finish the section in time was pretty striking to me. And he talks about that the skill you need as a lawyer, right, is not speed. You don't want your lawyer necessarily to be really fast, kind of like your accountant. Right? You want your lawyer to be really thoughtful, to be patient enough to read, right, and really comprehend what they're reading. But what do we reward when we're picking lawyers? We reward speed. And this is what we're trying to figure out at UW-Green Bay, right? Is how do we find all the skills that people have, meet them where they're at, and help them excel. Just because they can't take that test quickly doesn't mean they don't have skill, right? It just means that you need some tortoises and some hares. That some lawyers in some situations have to be fast. Still an important skill, right? If you have to read a 1,000-page brief and present tomorrow, you got to be able to read quickly. But that's not all lawyers. Right? And that's what we're trying to figure out at the university, right? How do we serve all students with all different kinds of skills and help them find the right degree and the right pathway for them to succeed in their careers? Okay, this I talked about. Sorry, I'll skip that. This also talked about, this is the sign, by the way, in Sheboygan, and some of the things that we're doing, right? So I talked about this as a picture of the Willie Davis Financial Investment Laboratory, right? This is what it's going to look like. That's what a modern classroom is going to be. That's important, right? That's a reason why a student is going to want to get out of their house or come out of their dorm room or come at night for a class, just sit there and do their work and have a professor guide them. And the building we talked about, right? That is what UW-Green Bay is going to look like in the next 5 years or so. It's important. Right? We're dreaming really big. So the state, for the first time basically in the history since the university started, it made a $96 million investment to take down the Coffin Library and build this new Coffin Research Center. Why? Because we need a building, right, that is reflective of the university that's thinking about education in a new way, right, and leading its region in thinking that way, right, inviting students, faculty, staff, and our community to come together to learn. That's what that new building is about, right? It's the first step, right, in what we're trying to do across the university to engage our region. So in the coming years, we're looking to build out. We have a lot of land at UW-Green Bay, 700 acres. We're one of the largest campuses anywhere, right? It's beautiful, unbelievable campus to get to work on every day. There's a lot of space here that we can use, right, to hopefully engage our community. We're looking at building a research park that will bring business to work with the university, right, to think about how we can drive traffic, in essence, right, to drive people to this part of Green Bay, right, and to all of our campuses to access education. One of the things I was really struck by when I moved here was that many people told me that UW-Green Bay is so far away from Green Bay. which is hilarious to me. First of all, because I moved from Colorado, where you would like drive 4 hours in a day and say it was a quick commute. That we're like a mile from the city of Green Bay. We're actually in the city limits of Green Bay. I mean, literally, but within a mile, you feel like you're in Green Bay. But we're somewhat detached. Right? And one of the things that we need to do is to get more and more people to come here, and forget our people to go there, right? To go out into the community. And we feel this building and how we're going to build out into the future to build spaces that are relevant to students in the 21st century and relevant to the community. The 21st century is going to be the key to our success. So that's my presentation. I'm really thrilled to get a chance to talk to you today. And I'm really, really proud and honored. I'll leave that picture up on the screen. Everything's better than the black screen. I'm really lucky to get to do what I do. I get to work with really amazing people every day. And I get to work in a really amazing region. I'm really proud to do that, and to hopefully the university can be a part of helping Northeast Wisconsin to succeed for many years into the future. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions that you have. So the question, just for those of you online, is how are things going in our engineering program? We are 50% above enrollment projections. As many of you know, we have one of the only, if not the only, new engineering school in the country over the last 20 years. Right? Why? Because our region told us, for us to be able to succeed, you must have engineering. Right? We fought like crazy for it. We have mechanical engineering, full mechanical engineering, and now we'll have full electrical engineering, also starting in January. The biggest problem we have literally is we can't build it fast enough. So as we speak, kind of behind us over here, there's about $6 million of renovations happening in our instructional services building to build new electrical engineering labs. The STEM Innovation Center, if you have a chance when you're on campus to run over there, it's an unbelievable building that really symbolizes, I think, the university. We didn't wait for the state to build us a building. They weren't going to do it. We had to have engineering. We partnered with the county. Right? We partnered with a couple of other organizations. We were able to build a $15 million building on our property, right, in coordination with Brown County in particular, right, and some money from the state, right, to be able to get the mechanical engineering labs that we need for us to be able to thrive. So that's here. So the engineering program, it's difficult to know. We are obviously, that's one of the things we're really, really proud of in not only that it started, but that it's already doing so well. But we know we can produce 500 more engineers every year. It's not going to be enough. So we have to keep thinking about that and thinking about the other kinds of engineering that the region needs to succeed. Right? So mechanical electric's a huge start for us. Right? Where do we need to keep investing to make sure that we are producing the kind of students that our workforce needs, that our economy needs to thrive? I should also mention, right, the same thing is true for a lot of our programs. Right? We've invested heavily in nursing. Why? Because the region needs more nurses. Right? Heavily in education. Why? Because there's a massive teacher shortage in Northeast Wisconsin, dangerously low. Our business program, right? So, over the last decade or so, from 600 students in the Conference School of Business to now over 1,500 students in the Conference School of Business, and rising every year. Why? Because that's what the region needs, right? That's what we keep doing that.
If you're watching on the video, have a question, submit it to the chat, and Michelle will ask it.
Are you able to hear me, people that are attending virtually? If not, I'll put the answer in the text chat. So the question is, what is the capacity of UW-GB at this time?
So the capacity is interesting. It's a great question. And I'm going to answer this in two ways. So one of the things that I was really struck by when I got here is the original chancellor at UW-Green Bay was named Ed Widener. And Chancellor Widener was to say he'd be visionary, I think would be an understatement. He had a pretty amazing idea of what a university should be. And in a lot of ways, he was spot on. He was just like 50 years ahead of his time. I mean, quite literally. And in his vision of the campus, he had this unbelievable thought, right, that it was sort of the hub of activity, and the campus was the library, right? This would be the center of where you got the information. And there'd be these spokes that came out from the library, and that the whole campus would think in an interdisciplinary way. And it was a pretty radical way to think about education at the time, for sure. Now we know, right, that it's the way to think about education, right? That the degree program, we have to call it something, but everyone knows that what you get in education goes beyond just those classes you take in your degree, right? It's how you learn from all those other programs around you that help you to really be successful, right? And so he really thought this way, and he made this amazing map that was like his vision, and there's a couple copies of it that I look at every day. And on the bottom of the map, he says UW-Green Bay, 20,000 students. And it's kind of funny when we did that study where he figured out the 2%, it's 20,000 students. So he was right. I think he's right. Now, what he was not factoring is that we were going to have campuses in Marinette, Manitowoc, and Sheboygan. And I think if you'd have told Green Bay, this region, that it could think regionally, think of the power of having all of Northeastern Wisconsin think as one, right? Particularly in education, right? Think of all the rural areas that are between Sheboygan and the top of the state. The capacity of UW-Green Bay is pretty unlimited. How fast we can get there, I'm not sure, but even those campuses alone, right? The Sheboygan campus, where we have, I should mention, we have the only 3 location campuses after the merger happened in the state, right? So when the state merged all the 2-year campuses into the universities, we have the only 3 locations in the state that are growing. So in Sheboygan, Manitowoc, and Marinette. But the Sheboygan campus, for example, is now over 400 students. It has capacity for over 1,000. Each of those campuses has capacity to grow. So and we're trying to work that way to provide access points in those communities for education. Right? Now you could get a 4-year degree in engineering in Sheboygan. Think about that. If you live in Sheboygan, what that means for your community, right? And the amount of engineers that are needed for the industry that's in Sheboygan. Right? Same thing in Manitowoc and Marinette, how we're thinking about how to really help those communities thrive now that we're there. So the capacity, I'm not really sure, but I believe that it's big. And part of our challenge as a university is not just to get our own university to believe that, but to get you to believe that. Right, to get the region to understand the potential that is here at this university, and that now it is time for it to realize it.
So the companies represented in FEI range from small, medium, large companies. So what can we do, our companies, what can we do to help UWGB with their access and their student success?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have to think here. I've never, oddly enough, I don't think I've ever been asked that. And I usually I can predict most of the questions I'm going to get. I've never been asked that question that way. A lot of things that we need is, first of all, to have people that we can talk to understand what you need. Right. So one of the things I love about the work that Matt is doing is I could never find him on the campus. That's how it should be. Right. He's out talking all over the region. What can we do in the Coffin School business to help you? That's why we exist, right? That's one thing. So when we ask for advice, to give it to us, tell us, hey, these are the skills that we need your graduates to have, right? That's one of the reasons why we have the Center for Financial Planning, for Personal Financial Planning, right? Because we were told, right, to have this certification, students to be able to come out as certified financial planners was a huge need in the region. I sat with Matt when we were told this, like, you have got to get this because we're desperate for it. Right. So that's one thing I know for sure that would help us is just your continual feedback, and continual advice. The other things, this is going to sound silly, but I think for a long time, UW-Green Bay has just been quiet. It's not that it's been an amazing university. The amount of alumni we've put out into the world in 56 years is unbelievable. When I got here, I couldn't believe it. When I looked at our alumni list and the things they're doing, it's unbelievable. In fact, someone told me today, it was really interesting, that often we're known better in some places across the country, even in the world. There's a group that apparently did some work in Santiago, Chile, in Green Bay some time ago, and we still get people who know UW-Green Bay are off the top of their tongue in Chile, maybe better than they know us right in our backyard. So perhaps one of the things I could ask is to in essence, repeat what we're saying, right? Go out and tell, hey, you should check out what's going on in UW-Green Bay, right? And then finally, I would say blunt, the world of higher education is changing. So, in the state of Wisconsin, the level of state support for an institution, right, was one of the highest in the country. We're now down below 20%. We're close to 17%, depending on how you arrange the numbers, of state support that we get. So in essence, the state is a major donor. So for the region to continue to thrive, we're looking very differently at how a business model works for an institution, right? We're not doing it the same way as Harvard, right? So, I mean, I'll maybe just talk a minute about this. Like, even when you think about this, most universities go out and try to raise money for endowments. We do that. We certainly want to grow our endowment. In particular cases, it makes a lot of sense. Right? But the idea that our endowment is going to be able to save the university is not possible. We're like $40 billion short. So we need, right, the community to support as we go, right? For us to be able to make sure that we have the resources we need to. So I get asked all the time, what's preventing you from growing the engineering program faster? It's a really simple answer. It's dollars. Right? When the state gave us engineering, we were given engineering and we were told we can't use any state resources for the first 5 years of the program. We had to run all that, we had to earn all the money we had to be able to run the engineering program. And that's what we've achieved over the last, I guess, 3 or 4 years now. Right? So that's part of what's key, right? We can no longer just rely on state support and be inward looking. Right? We have to look externally, right, to our community and the business that we serve to work with us, right, to help us to continue to serve the region.
Okay, the next question is coming virtually, and the question is, what engineering majors do you currently offer, and what will you probably add?
Also a great question. So the question was, what engineering majors do we have? What are we going to probably offer in the future? Right now, we have 2 full engineering degrees in mechanical engineering and electrical engineering. We have 3 degrees in engineering technology, which are still 4-year degrees, but more practically based than theoretically based, the best way I think I could explain it. So we have mechanical engineering technology, electrical engineering technology, and environmental engineering technology, right? So we have 5 engineering degrees that are currently possible. The next ones that we'll go for, I don't know, to be honest with you. We are having that discussion all the time and thinking very carefully both the resources that we would need to be able to put that next engineering program in place, and what is the most relevant engineering program we can do for this region, right? Really important for us to think about both of those things. So for example, one of the things we hear all the time is to start software engineering, which we'd love to do tomorrow, right? But the resources it would take for us to do that are enormous, right? And how fast we'd be able to produce the engineers we would need, we have to think carefully about whether that's the right next step for us. So we're unsure about where that's going to go.
Okay, the next question is, what is your largest school at this time?
Our largest school at this time, so I'm going to use university lingo here. We have 4 colleges. So this is completely irrelevant, but I'll bore you for just a second. That university is divided into colleges, okay, and they each have a dean, right? So the 4 colleges are business. We have College of Health, Education, and Social Welfare, College of Science, Engineering, and Technology, and the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences. The largest of those colleges is the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences. But if you had to ask what's our largest major, right, it depends on how you slice that term, right? It would be somewhere in business, right? So if you think of business as a whole, right, that's for sure where we have the most students and the most interest coming into the university.
There's one more virtual question, then we can open it back up to the audience. So the live audience, so get your questions ready. Final virtual online question is, can you use some of your prominent alumni to help promote your case?
Yes, we are absolutely doing that, and we're very fortunate to have some prominent alumni in our region that are very vocal about what we're trying to do and trying to help us. It was really neat. I, I don't use social media, but there's a Twitter account for the Chancellor, and I tweeted out yesterday that that how proud we were that we had once again grown. It was kind of fun today to do a lot of interviews about that fact, right? That everyone keeps asking, well, how are you doing this? But what's pretty neat about it is that the amount of people who responded that are understanding what we're doing and know the importance of that happening. Right? So we're absolutely relying on our alumni to help us in trying to engage our alumni as fast as we can. I think one of the things to remember, which is an odd thing to say, we are one of the younger institutions in the country. We're only 56 years old. Our alumni are just now getting to retirement age. That's kind of a weird thing to say, right? We don't have 150 years worth of alumni. And so we're really working to engage them as fast as we can. And it's pretty neat to see. You can see it. I feel it, and maybe I feel what I want to feel in some ways at the university, but you can sort of feel the momentum we are gaining. People are noticing. We're getting asked a lot, how in the world is that happening there? And that to me is a good sign. And we have lots of people in the community I know who are helping us out to make that happen.
We've got a question over here.
Thank you. We have two boys in the UW system. College is not GD, sorry. But,
that's okay.
Where do you see and this is a point of issue or interest for us, where do you see the cost of education going for public schools or possibly private?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll say a couple things on this. First of all, I think one of the things that is really important to understand about our enrollment growth is we're not really competing with any other UW institution. In fact, we're partnering with them as fast as we can. So for example, in our business school, we now have partnerships with Madison University of Illinois for our graduates to go to graduate school in business programs in Madison University of Illinois. Right? We're working really hard. We've got a social work program in Wausau where we partner with Stevens Point, right? Where our graduate program in social work, we have a great social work program here. The undergrad program at Stevens Point feeds into our graduate program in Wausau. Why? Because no one has the resources to do this alone. Right? We have to partner to collaborate. Right? Our students, we know, predominantly come from the local region. Right? 70% stay. Also, about 70% live right here. Right? They're making the choice: do I go to college or do I not? They're often not making the choice: do I go to La Crosse or do I come to Green Bay? So we want every UW institution to succeed. The state needs that. Right? That's the first step. The second thing I would say is that the way the media frames student debt is a challenge. So there's two. I mean, you all are accountants, you understand this. There's two kinds of debt, right? There's good debt and there's bad debt. The media often paints the picture that you have students coming out of college with hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of debt. I can tell you, unless you take an unbelievable amount of time and take an unbelievable amount of credits at UW-Green Bay, you cannot do that. It's impossible. Our tuition is less than $8,000 a year. It is the best value for education you can get if you live here. There's no doubt about it. Now, this is really important for me to state, I think. That doesn't mean that is an inexpensive education. So if your family income is $60,000 a year or less, $50,000 a year, if that tuition is 1/4 of your annual family income, you can't afford it. Right? And that's the challenge that we have. Right? So the other thing that we are doing here, which I'm very excited about, is even how we offer scholarships in the future, we're reframing. We're putting all the resources we can, not just in merit scholarships, which is how most universities do it, right? The smarter you are, the more money you get. We're offering scholarships based on need. When someone applies to Green Bay, the first thing we're looking at is what is your need to be able to go to college. We also have merit scholarships, okay? But we're asking all of our donors, basically, who donate to us now, is will you consider giving that money first to a student in need, right? That's the student that needs our support. The student that's a 4.0 GPA and is doing great in school is going to have options. Right? A lot of universities are going to give them money. Very few are going to give money to the one that has a 3.0 GPA and whatever on the ACT. That's the student that we're trying to make sure is getting the support they need. Right? And again, it's another reason why we're not competing with those other UW institutions. Ideally, each of the institutions would be serving a different population, right? And that's what we're trying. We're really trying to be distinct as who we are as a campus. Right? We're not interested in competing with Eau Claire, La Crosse, or Parkside, or anything else, right? We could be great just by worrying about what's here in our region.
You know, one of the issues that we all face is recruitment and retention of talent. And so I wonder, in your setting for professors, especially with the direction that you're going with the university, the way you're differentiating yourselves, how is that going for the university?
So I will say that we are not immune from the market. So I'll just use computer science as an example. I think you would be shocked if I told you what a computer science faculty member makes relative to what they can make out of industry. It's not close. I hope none of our computer science faculty are listening. It's difficult, right? Because we are trying to hire the very best we can get to come to Green Bay, right, to teach the students that are in this region. Right? We not only competing with other universities, we're competing with what they can get outside of the university. Right. So your point is a huge one. To me, one of the biggest threats we have as a university is compensation, and we're working very hard to try to fix that. That is a huge problem that we're going to have to deal with in the coming years. I will say though that on the flip side of that, I think this is a tribute really to the region. We typically, if we retain someone after the first 6 years or so, we typically keep them for a very long time, which means they like working at the university, right? And they like living in the region. So that's encouraging. And so we're, the particular fields where it's getting more challenging for us to hire, we're going to work through that. But there's good signs, but also an enormous challenge that's going ahead.
Thank you. First of all, great presentation. Very interesting to hear about particularly how the student experience is changing, and kind of building on that last question a little bit. How's the teaching experience changing? What would you ask of faculty members today, or what their history is? How is the process different for them today?
This is a tremendous question. I'm not sure if I've used tremendous yet, so I'll say this because but I'm going to answer this a couple ways. I think I could probably talk for another hour on the subject, but I will. I'm incredibly grateful to work at a place where I feel like anytime we have to meet a challenge, I can go to our faculty and they're going to listen, and we're going to be able to have a discussion about how best to move forward. And if you can, I want you to imagine just for a second that people spend 7 to 10 years of their life studying to get a terminal degree in what they're doing, and even beyond that at times. They often come to start working in university after they have gotten their degrees at the most prestigious universities in the country. And so you're trained at Stanford or at Madison or at these big Research One institutions. And the first job you get is at UW-Green Bay. And suddenly you're told, remember all that research you did where you had $500 million microscope? Now your job is to go find money to do your research. And we want you to teach 4 classes a semester, not 1, 4. We want to make sure that you have enough office hours to meet all of your students all the time. And to get promoted, we want you to do your research and do community service. So we ask a lot of them. So the narrative that professors don't work hard, it kind of gets me angry. They work really, really hard. that trick, though, of trying to find the right fit. So when we're hiring professors, in my opinion, we have to find professors who understand who we are and what we're trying to do and love it. And in my mind, you can tell right away when someone walks on campus. I think we're getting better at doing it. Right? Now, what I will say is I'm incredibly grateful that for a lot of the campus that is here, they are no longer working at the same university they started at. And for a lot of people who are working here, they were working at a campus that was around 5,000 students. It's now approaching 10,000. They're working at a campus that was trying to be more exclusive. Now we're being completely inclusive. So we've asked them to completely turn on a dime what they're doing, and they're doing it, right? Which tells you that while sometimes it's true that universities can be inflexible, not always. This university is pretty remarkably flexible, and the faculty are really, I think, meeting that challenge in a way that I'm really, really proud of. So it's a great question, and one that's very complicated at times to navigate, but important.
All right, I want to thank the Chancellor very much. Can we give him a nice round of applause?